Most of the people of St. Vincent are the descendants of African slaves who had been brought here to toil the rich sugar plantations. During the 17th, 18th, and early 19th centuries, slave ships had been a common sight in Kingstown Harbor. The slave trade had been so horribly well organized and so lucrative. Some of the finest families of England, France, Spain, Portugal, and the United States made their fortunes by selling slaves. Slave traders had agents in Africa. Some were African themselves, who rounded up men, women, and children like cattle. Many they kidnapped. Many more they purchased from tribal leaders. The agents herded these people to holding pens at Timbuktu and Gao. From there, the slaves were transported to slave markets in Africa and southern Spain, where they were sold to merchants and ship owners. The sold slaves were then herded to the coast and loaded onto slave ships for the Atlantic crossing. They were taken to plantations in South America, the Caribbean, and North America. A typical slave ship ranged between 80 to 250 tons. It was usually 80 to 90 feet long and 20 to 25 feet wide. The slave deck was between the hold and the main deck. It had 5 feet of clearance, some less. Into this narrow space, 230, sometimes 300 slaves were stowed like spoons. Many had to relieve themselves where they were. Depending on sea conditions, the voyage would take 30 to 50 days, long enough for water to become scummy, food scarce. Dysentery was the worst of the diseases on a slave ship. Smallpox was second. Yet for all the filth and overcrowding, the mortality rate among slaves during an ocean crossing was relatively low, about 9%. Crew members stood a higher risk of dying during the crossing than a slave. That's only because a healthy slave was money in the bank. Many had landed at St. Vincent to unload their human cargo. Many more, bound for other Caribbean ports, dropped anchor in Kingstown to replenish supplies after a hard Atlantic crossing. There is documented evidence that the slave ship Africa had wrecked in Kingstown Harbor during a hurricane in the 1780s. Is this what lies on the bottom of Kingstown Harbor, a slave ship?